This is our first ever guest on these live shows. Her name is Courtenay. She's been living here since 2012 in Colombia, in Medellin since 2013. We've been friends since she basically got into the city. Not only is she an entrepreneur, she's bought property here in Colombia and has it now on Airbnb. And on top of that, she is also a mom and raising a kid out here. So tell us a little bit about your family first and how that experience has been over the last 12 or 13 years.
Sure. I have one son. His name is Marcello. He is now 12 years old. He was just a baby. He was only 14 months old, just over a year when we moved to Colombia. His dad, Giovanni, he is also friends with Andrew. We all know each other. And Gio continues to live in Medellin as well. And so we co-parent Marcello here. And let's see, we have no family directly in Medellin. Gio has family in Barranquilla, but that's about an hour plane ride away. So we stay in touch, but we're not in a situation where we have grandparents we can just drop the kid off with around the block. But it is so much easier here than it is in the United States. There is no question about that. And so one of the huge benefits here is that household help, either in the form of childcare or helping keep the house clean, the cooking, etc., or all of the above, is affordable. And that for me was a game changer, especially when my son was really young, because what it meant, and I did not anticipate this actually, what it meant was more quality time with my kid. I sort of originally just thought of it as like, oh, well, someone will clean the house on a more regular basis than I could have afforded if I had lived in the U.S. But it was more than that. It was that after I finished my workday, instead of jumping right into cooking dinner, and then, you know, if you're in a two-parent household, a lot of times one person's cooking dinner, one person's actually feeding the kid. You're lucky if you actually eat together, especially if you have a baby.
Yeah.
And then somebody's putting the baby to bed while the other person is washing the dishes and cleaning up the kitchen. And then by the time you finish all of that, both of you are exhausted, and maybe you have 30 minutes to watch TV and then conk out.
Unwind, yeah.
Yeah. And it's grueling. It's really grueling. Whereas here, I had someone to help cook dinner and that sort of thing. And so it was not unusual that Gio and I, when Marcello was just a baby, would finish our workday and then just be sitting in the living room playing with our baby.
Yeah.
And that's priceless. I mean, that's huge.
That is huge. I know a lot of you guys probably have questions about costs. So what would something like that cost you here in Medellin?
Well, I actually had to look these things up because I have no memory for numbers. It's not that I don't know. But let's see. For household help right now, there's two ways that you can do it. You can have someone interna, as they say, meaning internal. The person basically lives in your house. Or you can have someone who's externa, who comes in just during the day, for example, on whatever schedule you both agreed to. And the payment requirements for both of those under Colombian law are a little bit different. So in my case, I have someone, she's moving toward externa, but traditionally I've had the same person for years. She's been interna, and I think the minimum for that right now, and don't quote me on this, is like just under let's see, 700,000 like every 15 days. So $1.4 million or something. $1.4 million a month.
$1,400,000 a month to have someone in your house full time.
Yes. And
do you go through an agency for that, or?
You should, ideally, unless you really know what you're doing. The reason for that is there are laws about having to provide the social benefits, if we can put it that way, like healthcare, liability insurance, even though it's not called that here, contributions toward the Colombian version of Social Security.
Right.
If you're going to do things the way that you should be doing them, in my opinion, you either need to know how to do all those things yourself, or you need to go through an agency so that the agency handles all of that for you. And I do want to make clear that the minimum is actually different if the person is externa also, because The calculation is different because if you're providing housing for the person, that gets calculated into the benefits they're getting from working for you.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And you can obviously pay people more. So what we're talking about are minimums here, and lots of people have different philosophies about those things, obviously. But I'm all for all these laws that protect the domestic employees because there's a lot of risk associated with those jobs. It's worth it to do it correctly.
What other things have you experienced here while raising Marcello?
Well, let's see where to start. I mean, Colombia is a family-friendly culture, which seems like a very generalized thing to say, and it is. But to put this in concrete terms, people will just help you with your child, and your child will be welcomed almost anywhere. Like if you have a let's say an under 10 kid, like there's a lot of places in the United States, for example, where you're not going to want to take your kid with you because people are going to frown on it. They're not going to want the kid in the nice restaurant. That's almost not true here. Children are welcome almost anywhere. In the U.S., like people tend to just get annoyed.
And kind of like keep their personal space. And
yes.
Stuff. Yeah. One of the questions here by Better, he asks, what school does your kid go to?
He goes to a school called the Columbus School. The Columbus School presents basically as sort of an international school, but the reality is that the population that attends is still almost entirely from Antioquia, the state that Medellin is in. One of the things that I was not aware of is that for the private schools in Medellin, you have to get on the list to get in really early. So a lot of times people get on the list when they're pregnant, for example. I just had no idea. And then you have to have references and that sort of thing. We had to really scramble. And actually, I think the only reason that Marcello got into that school was because my mother, who does not speak any Spanish at all, came to visit, and we went to an event for the daycare that Marcello was in. My mom found the one English-speaking person at the event and chatted her up. And it turned out that she was very well connected at the school and really helped pave the way for me. Sandra, I still appreciate you.
So I've been doing a ton of research because a little secret here that I've only told all of my friends basically and my parents and my family. My girlfriend is pregnant. She didn't know either.
I didn't know. Congratulations.
My boys can swim. I've been doing, again, I'm a nerd. So I've been doing a lot of research. And what you're saying is absolutely true. I've already called Colombia Americano and the baby's only 3 months in her belly.
Exactly.
It's like I've already called them and they said, okay, you're on the list for an interview. But we know somebody at Colombia Americano. So we might get a letter. So that's huge. So let's talk about cost.
So for the Columbus School, so basically including the monthly fee for the private school, the bus, the food at the school, you're talking about 3,500,000 pesos, which is around 873 US dollars per month. Now that doesn't include, any extracurriculars or that sort of thing. And of course, you could drive your kid yourself. But one of the things that is a bit particular to Medellin is a lot of the private schools are just out of town. And so it's actually quite normal for the kids to have a very long bus ride. And they just grew up that way and they're used to it.
Yeah. Now tell us about this school. I did some research, but are the classes in English?
The classes, let's see, Kinder Cuatro, the 4-year kindergarten that they go when they're 4 years old, that's in Spanish. Starting with the 5-year-olds, they start speaking English. And then after that, the only classes that are in Spanish are social studies and Spanish class. The rest is in English. So the kids come out speaking completely fluent English by the end. And I mean, in my kid's case, he's fully bilingual, but I actually wish that he spoke more Spanish than he does.
Well, it's probably because at home he's also speaking English. But most of the kids that are going there, like you said, are Colombian.
So they're speaking Spanish at home.
Pretty much their daily life is in Spanish. But I remember for Marcello's birthday when I went over, all his little friends spoke perfect English.
Yep.
And their parents were Colombian, and they didn't speak English, most of them. I was like, this is awesome. If I ever have a kid, my kid's going to that. So I got a huge question, being another I guess, guy. Well, what are the sports like at Columbus School? Like, do they do sports there?
Yes, they definitely do sports. So you'll be able to relate to this. My son is definitely into basketball.
Let's go.
So he plays on the school team. And
No way. They got a team too?
Oh, yeah,
my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
All right, yeah.
Totally.
It's going to be completely...
They have basically every sport out there. The only thing that Columbus doesn't have that I'm not sure I understand why they don't have it is swimming. Because they have a huge campus. A lot of these private schools have campuses that look like a college campus or something.
I know. I've seen pictures.
And they, for whatever
amazing.
reason, they don't have a pool. And a lot of the schools do have pools. So they're missing the swimming. Other than that, they have pretty much every sport out there, and also just a really wide range of extracurriculars. One thing to know about Columbus, and I'm sure it's true of some of the other private schools as well, you come out with an international baccalaureate degree,
Okay.
which is basically, I don't know the technical requirements, but it's the equivalent of a U.S. high school diploma. And so you can seamlessly go into the U.S. university system, for
Wow.
example,
That's huge.
without having any issues. So that's one of the main reasons why we wanted to be there or
Yeah.
at a school that had that. And for those of you who are thinking of perhaps coming just for a year or two or something like that, and then going back to the U.S., you may want to look for schools that offer the International Baccalaureate program, because they're more likely, at least as far as I understand, to have curriculum that is in keeping with all the standard U.S. goals. So
Right.
make it easier on your kid.
Right. Okay. That's really good advice. There are so many extracurricular things that kids can do here, from learning how to swim as babies to, like, for example, like little science classes.
Yes, Marcella's done those. They have here what are called vacacionales. One thing to know, there's two school calendars. There's the A calendar and the B calendar. The A calendar has their biggest break over Christmas time. And so that's kind of like their summer.
Right.
And the B calendar has the biggest break over what we traditionally think of in North America, in the U.S. as summer.
Yeah.
And so during those big breaks, all over the city, there are different activities you can sign your kid up for that are essentially like day camps,
Yeah.
but they're themed day camps. And so you can do a robotics day camp. You can send your kid to like an outdoor survival type day camp. That didn't
cool.
go over real well with Marcello.
Really?
Yeah, we did that one year. He's like, yeah, no.
How do you view tourism that has shifted now where we see more families here?
When families move here and people with kids, it's a real benefit on both sides, because I think that's the type of sort of exposure to outside cultures that is useful in Medellin itself, and also the type of expats or foreigners who really contribute quite a lot to the community in general. And then, of course, for the people who actually are coming here, they're receiving a huge benefit in terms of the quality of life that Medellin has to offer and the culture that Paisas bring to the table. And so I think that's a win-win.
That's one of the biggest demographic of people that I've seen change over time, because when I first got here back in 2010 and even up until like 2017, 18, you hardly ever saw either female travelers, like solo female travelers, and or families. Like now you see both all of the time.
It used to be that if you saw families here, usually they moved for a corporate job. Like for example, the father came here for, you know, a big corporate position
Right.
in Latin America type of thing. But now I think it's more diversified in terms of how and why people are coming.
What about healthcare here for a family?
I was hoping you were going to bring that up next. I love my healthcare here. I always tell people, I mean, there are certain things that I may complain about with Colombia from time to time, but the healthcare that I have is not one of them. Now, I want to be clear. I have a private policy. My family has a private policy. So I'm not saying that all Colombians benefit from the level of healthcare that I have. If you are a Colombian on the EPS, which is basically just the regular health plan, you may have to wait for a lot of things. And, you know, there's a lot of downsides to it. But if you are able to pay for a private policy, in my situation, there's no comparison with the U.S. Here in Medellin, I pay, and I wrote this down too, I pay basically $300 a month that covers me and Marcello, and it's amazing. I don't wait for anything. I can go see any doctor I want. I get reimbursed for practitioners who aren't in the plan, which is very few.
Yeah.
But even then, that's covered. I just have to ask for a reimbursement.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you
so good.
kidding me?
That's so good.
Because in the U.S., you're used to, especially if you have a kid, like you call and you get an answering service, and some guy at the answering service decides whether your call is worthy of bothering the doctor or whatever. Like here, especially if you have a child, oh my gosh, I write my pediatrician and she responds like immediately, and it blows my mind.
It's insane.
And I absolutely love it. Love it, love it. Love it. All three of us in our family have had surgeries in Colombia, not non-cosmetic surgeries. And
they all got butt implants.
Well, hey, listen, I'm not knocking it, but in any case, we have had great experiences. I mean, just really great experiences.
Yeah. Let me ask you, what plan are you on? I'm on Sura Global.
I'm on the same plan, and one of the things that also amazes me about Sura Global is it covers you in basically every country in the world except I think two.
Yeah.
And I've actually used it. So
really, if outside of Colombia?
Yes. So if you have a kid, having coverage outside is important, at least to me. That's how I feel, because I have gone on 3-week trips to go see the grandparents in the U.S. and my son has had an accident. I've had to take him to the emergency room. He's gotten sick. I've gotten sick. And we have absolutely used it, and it hasn't been a problem. And did you know that at least the plan that I have, it even covers a high percentage of a surgery that you choose to do in your home country?
Oh, really?
So, like, let's say you need open heart surgery, and for whatever reason, you want to do it with Dr. X in the U.S. Now, it's not going to cover the whole thing, but it's going to cover, like, a big chunk.
Wow. If you have a kid and you come down here, you can expect, if you want to have like the best stuff, basically the best school, you're paying about $9,000 best per year. The best healthcare, which is $300 per month. That's about what, almost $4,000, $3,500 a year. The in-person nanny, or the person that helps you at the house, which costs about $700. If you take those two things, or those three things, and try to do that in the US, you are not going to be doing all those three things. So we're talking about like 20 or 30 G's a year and if you have dual incomes, that's very reasonable to raise a family. The next question I have for you is, what's your take on safety in Medellin?
Well, I moved to Colombia from Miami, and Miami is not necessarily the safest city in the United States, depending on where you are. Yeah. And so for me, I didn't feel it was a huge change. I had friends in Miami who had safety issues, the same as I've had friends in Medellin have safety issues. It didn't feel like a huge adjustment for me at all. The only thing that I think for me as a woman is really different here is walking at night. And I love to walk. I'm somebody who tends to walk everywhere. And I'm also somebody who tends to sort of naturally feel safe wherever. Like, I'm not too worried about it in general. And I've gotten myself into trouble like twice over 11 years walking home at night when I shouldn't have.
Okay.
But I know I'm not supposed to do that, you know, and that's what I've done. But nonetheless, I think in my case, 2 incidents over 11 years is not a very high rate, particularly given that I'm not overly cautious about it like some people are.
Yeah.
And I also don't think it's much different than what I might have experienced had I continued living in Miami, maybe a little bit. So I love to run. I'm a lifelong runner. I did stop running at night here.
Yeah.
But other than that, I feel safe. And it's not a deal breaker even remotely for me. And as far as my son goes, when he was little, people would warn me more about keeping a close eye on him. But I think a lot of times I'm generalizing, obviously. It tended to be older people who really lived through a time of a lot of kidnappings.
Yeah.
And that's just not, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's certainly no kind of way that it used to be. And so sometimes you'll have older people tell you, oh, no, don't leave your son unattended or whatever. But I think that's kind of a holdover from past times rather than so much an actual real concern.
Right. Yeah. 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 After living here 13 years, for me, it's like the people that I see getting in trouble, like safety wise, either getting robbed, mugged, or whatever, it's people that don't know, like you were saying, like, that you're not supposed to do certain things, that they come down here, they're first timers or just very short timers, and they don't know that they're not supposed to be doing this, even in, like the Beverly Hills of Medellin, which is El Poblado. Like you were saying, you stopped running at night. Like, and we're talking about the Beverly Hills, the safest area of the city. You shouldn't be doing that. I think even if you're a guy, you probably shouldn't be doing that. Yeah,
it's probably not a great idea.
Yeah, and so things like that. If you're not aware, then something bad can happen. Courtenay, much love to you and your family. Thank you so much.
No, Andrew, thanks so much for having me. It was so much fun. And thanks to all of you who are commenting and watching. It's been awesome.
We'll have to do another one maybe like in a year and do like a catch-up interview.
That would be awesome.
Where you're at. Hopefully you have another apartment or something. We'll see. Or maybe you'll be married by then. We'll see.
This is giving me goals.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Don't forget to hit the like button. I'll see you guys next Saturday.